In June 2000, Babylon 5 creator and science fiction writer J. Michael Straczynski was asked about how a spaceship on one of his shows was able to travel so quickly. He answered that the ship had the ability to travel at the speed of plot. We see this all the time in movies, characters arriving just in time, trekking hundreds of miles in a few hours, or taking way too long to travel a short distance. It really all comes down to what the plot needs, no matter how implausible it may be. There's a sequence at the end of the second Transformers movie that finds the main characters in Egypt and Jordan. Normally this wouldn't be so strange, but the undocumented travelers seem to be able to hop back and forth between Petra and Giza way too easily. The worst instance is when the group is outside a temple in Petra, Jordan, looking through binoculars to the Giza pyramids a solid 250 miles away. They jump in their respective transforming cars and speed across southern Israel to arrive in Giza what seems to be only moments later. In reality, this is a 10-hour drive crossing heavily guarded borders without any passports. Actually, they already addressed how to handle borders in this movie. You just have to mention that you're from New York.
We're tourists. From New York.
New York?
Yes. Yes.
50 kilometers.
Look like the guy who runs my falafel stand. Okay, thank you very much.
When Nemo goes missing at the beginning of this beloved Pixar movie, nothing can stop his father Marlin from getting him back. Not even over 1,000 miles of ocean travel. So assuming these clownfish live at the southernmost point of the Great Barrier Reef, the trip to 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney is still over 1,200 miles long. The film explains the speed of Marlin and Dory's journey with the EAC, the East Australian Current, a large surface current that's created by winds from the South Pacific. But even this powerful current travels at its fastest at 90 centimeters per second. That's around 2 miles per hour. That means that Marlin and Dory were riding on the back of that surfer turtle for almost 26 days, whereas in the movie, the sequence takes only a few minutes.
Righteous! Righteous!
That's not even the weirdest part of all this. The real question is, what was Dr. P. Sherman of 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney doing all the way up in the Great Barrier Reef on his tiny boat? The boat has a single outboard motor, which might move them at around 28 miles per hour in the choppy coastal waters. At this speed, it would take the dentist and his traveling companion almost 46 hours to get back to Sydney, and the boat would consume more than 400 gallons of fuel. Now, it is possible that Sherman and Nemo got on a plane to head back to Sydney, but airlines can get a little iffy about allowing fish on planes. Whether it's by foot, horse, boat, or dragon, characters in Game of Thrones are always on the move. Unless you're Daenerys in Season 5.
Everyone looks happy enough from up here.
One character who seems to always be popping up in distant locales is the ever-conniving Littlefinger. Westeros is about 3,000 miles long and 900 miles wide. In Season 5, Episode 4, Littlefinger leaves Winterfell for King's Landing, where he arrives 2 episodes later. Traveling 1,500 miles in the course of one episode isn't unheard of, but considering it took Arya 3 seasons to get from King's Landing to the Eyrie, somehow this seems a bit skewed. Writers have said that the timelines across different characters' storylines don't always match up, which could account for the discrepancy, but it could also be that Littlefinger just always has to be in 2 places at once. Losing your friends can drive you to do some extreme things, but could it encourage you to run an ultra-marathon for 3 days straight? In The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas make a mad dash to catch up with the orcs who kidnapped Merry and Pippin at the end of the Fellowship.
Come, Gimli!
If you read the book and you do a lot of math and cross-reference the Shire calendar with the Gregorian calendar, you can figure out that the 3 heroes run about 135 miles in 72 hours, from the banks of the Anduin to the edge of the Fangorn forest. This might be a plausible journey, assuming you're an ultra-marathoner or you're okay not sleeping for 3 days. That being said, these 3 are carrying a lot of armor and weapons. They've just spent hours fighting off giant Uruk-hai, and let's not forget that Aragorn is canonically 87 years old. Considering all of this, the effort that these folks put into saving the hobbits is really something. In this climate change disaster movie, young academic athlete Jake Gyllenhaal gets stuck in the frozen wastes of New York City while his father, paleoclimatologist Dennis Quaid, is hanging out at the NOAA headquarters in Maryland. In order to save his son from freezing to death in a library, Quaid and some coworkers decide to travel up to NYC. However, when they are
just north of Philadelphia,
their truck crashes into a snowbank and is rendered useless. The trio decides to walk from here and spend 2.5 days trudging through an intense blizzard. Somehow, these scientists are able to hike 90 miles in around 60 hours in intense winds and heavy snow. Assuming the travelers are moving at a pace of around 1 mile an hour, considering the bad weather conditions and taking into account at least a few hours of sleep each night, the math doesn't add up. In reality, they would probably arrive the day after tomorrow. It's hard to judge just how far the Beast's castle is from the village where Belle lives, or even if the villagers know the castle is there. So it's hard to say exactly how long a stroll to the enchanted abode would take. That being said, there are two very disparate travel times presented in the film. The first character to visit the Beast is Maurice, Belle's father, who gets lost on his way to the market. On horseback, it takes him at least a day to get there. Compare that to the villagers' mob at the end of the film, who managed to make the journey in the course of a single song. The real-world inspiration for the Beast's home is a castle in France called Château de Chambord. The nearest town to the chateau, Masleves, is about 2.5 miles away through the forest, only an hour on foot. So maybe old Maurice was just bad with directions and too proud to ask for help. It's a tale as old as time. This one just makes fun of the whole trope. During this montage of the villains chasing the heroes back to the palace, they clearly fall far behind, only to arrive first.
How did you get back here before us?
How did we, Kronk?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.